You work here?
Sure do.
I got a question about this gunpowder. This gunpowder doesn't say that it's temperature stable. Would it be safe to use this gunpowder if I left it in my car in the middle of summer in Florida?
Stable as Bama football without Saban.
What the Old Man Taylor, welcome back to the Reloading Bench. Today's topic, temperature, and specifically temperature sensitivity or lack thereof in our smokeless propellants. Now, why is this coming up? For me, I'm going from summer into winter. Not really sure when you're watching this, but that's brought up a thought, and that is I've developed a bunch of loads over the summer. How much difference am I going to have when I fire those in the winter? Well, temperature sensitivity, as we know, all smokeless powders are impacted by temperature to some degree or another. We tend to talk about temperature stability in different powders. This one's better than that one. Question is, how big of an impact does this have? So that's what we're going to dig into today. So what am I testing today? Well, I've got the three powders that you've seen me load quite a bit on this channel. So I asked the internet, which of these powders would be more temperature sensitive? This is what the internet had to say with this little AI up there. It said that double base powders that have nitroglycerin and nitrocellulose in them, are more temperature sensitive, have a bigger change in pressure based on temperature than single base powders. It said that TAC, Ramshot, was definitely going to be more temperature sensitive. It was going to have, it's known to be very temperature sensitive. It's going to have a big change based on temperature and pressure. All right, then I plugged in my IMR 4895, and it said that this one was going to be a lot better than the TAC, but it still had some temperature sensitivity. It said it was moderate. Then my Vihtavuori N140 said that this one, even though it's also single-based, has no nitroglycerin in it, just like the IMR, it's got other additives in it that would make it even more temperature sensitive than the other two. So this one should be our best, this should be our middle, and this should be our worst based on the internet. Well, that's not good enough for me. I'm going to test it. We're going to find out, is that true or not? Now, my temperature swings at this time of year, 70 degrees to 90, 95, something like that. If it's dry outside, I can see that big of a swing. That's not going to be big enough, and I won't be able to get all of my testing done in that window anyway. So I'm going to do something a little more extreme than that. Let's take a look at that. All right, so I bought some CO2, carbon dioxide dry ice. It sublimates at about 109 atmospheric pressure, and I got some hot hands to pack inside my cooler here, and I'm going to make a really cold and a really hot box. I'm going to take my loads, I'm going to put half of them in my cold box, half of them in my hot box, and I'm going to let those cartridges come down, in this case, to minus 20, minus 30 degrees, something like that. Over here, I'm going to try to get this up to about 120 or so. And we're going to shoot half our loads cold and half our loads hot. What's that going to look like? That's going to be 10 cartridges of each of those powders in each of those temperatures. So total of 60 shots. Now, how am I going to do that? I'm going to have to bring a friend along, and you saw a joke at the beginning of this. Let me introduce to you Buck. Buck's going to meet us at the range, and what he's agreed to do is, as I'm going to get on the rifle, I'm going to find my target and be ready to fire with my bolt open. I'm going to ask him to load, and he's going to pull one of those cartridges right out of one of these two boxes, and we're going to load that and fire it as quick as we can so it's not impacted by the chamber, and we're going to let the chamber cool down. We're going to run the chronograph to get some velocities. We're going to look at the group sizes and see what our point of aim shift looks like, and how, do our groups open up when they get really cold? Do they open up when they get really hot? What happens to them when we're in these two extremes? And in order to calculate these temperatures, I'm going to be running a bunch of sensors I just happen to have by trade. I have a very high quality set of wireless temperature probes. So we'll be taking temperatures of the barrel, we'll be taking temperatures of our ambient temp, we'll be taking temperatures of the cartridges as they come out of the boxes, and we'll be taking temperatures of the boxes to maintain that. We're going to let that barrel cool down between each shot. Somewhere we're going to keep that between 95 and 105, something like that, so that they're all seeing a very similar chamber. Now, they're not going to sit in that chamber long, and if it does heat anything up at all, it'll be just the brass. It won't be the powder, which is going to sit in these overnight before I take them to the range. Anybody who's interested in what I'm loading and how I loaded it, it is exactly the same process that I've used in the last two videos. And I'll go ahead and put a link to new brass versus once fired. That's where I take you through that process. That's exactly the process I used again for these 60 shots. 30 cold, 30 hot. We're going to the range. I'll see you there. All right, we've got N140 shots 1 through 5 cold. These are going into the bottom target, left-hand side. Load. Put that in the green box. Load. It is not coming out hot. Load. Load. Ready, load. That's wild. They're coming out of this chamber cold.
Shooters, we have 2 minutes remaining hot. We have 2 minutes remaining hot.
Load.
Yep.
This
I gotta
is
open this
IMR
box.
going into the top right target cold.
I gotta open up the box. Give me a second.
Another 22. I'm ready when you're ready.
It's 3.
We got us. All right.
I'm 4.
Load it well.
N140 cold. Last round.
I'll get a couple of sandbags. Some heavy. A little bit. Like this. Look through there. Right. You guys want to you can move the table back and forth. This is up.
And load.
Staying about the same.
Load.
What do you think?
And load.
That's what always happens.
We have 2 minutes remaining hot. We have 2 minutes remaining hot.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah. Huh? First box done. Let it cool off a minute. This one.
Back from the range, and I've got targets. And I'm going to put these up, of course, but before I do, as usual, let's just take a look at them with me as a scale to see some of these are not too bad looking 5-shot groups. And by the way, on my first target, I do have my sighters in that corner if you were wondering what that was all about. I did fire a few shots just to warm up the rifle and make sure everything was good to get into that 95 to 105. That's what that group was. When we're looking at our 5-shot groups, we had some pretty dang good ones. 0.3 inches. The worst was 0.87. So they were all under an inch with no problem there. If you watch my channel, you hear me talk about 5-shot groups quite a bit and why sometimes they tell us a tale, right? So when we put together those two 5-shot groups, which is what this was all about, 10-shot groups, we get a composite of what our true 10-shot group is, same point of aim, so I can overlay them and get a real 10-shot group. Not as good. They mostly shot under 1 inch on the 10-shot groups, except one, and I did kind of rush a little bit, probably me on that one. But nonetheless, they were all in that 0.7 to 0.9 inch range, with the exception of that one, which is pretty consistent with where these normally shoot. These are all proven loads that I shoot all the time, and they do typically print somewhere between 0.6 and 0.8. So, really, even the extreme temperatures, the groups were pretty consistent. Like I said, I was a little rushed, probably could have done a touch better shooting. So group size, not much of a difference on the temperatures. Now, let's talk about that point of aim, because that could matter. If we're hunting or if we're competition shooting, either one, having our groups move on us is a bigger deal. So what I did is I took the 10-shot groups, and you can see the green X on each one of those targets going by. That's the point, the center of that group. So I took those centers, put those in the computer, and calculated the distance between them so I could see what the shift actually turned out to be. Well, what it turned out to be for IMR and N140, both of them were very similar, just over 1/4 inch, just a hair over 1/4 inch. For TAC, it's a little bigger, 0.63 inches, so that's 0.6 MOA. That's about 3 inches at 500 yards for the most extreme shift that we had through the whole thing. Not a giant change, 1/4 inch at 100 yards, not that big a deal. So let's talk about our velocity shift. What if we're going beyond 100 yards? What is that going to look like? Or how much energy I'm delivering to my target? As far as change in velocity from our coldest to our hottest, the best actually turned out to be TAC. I had 156 feet per second difference between our coldest and our hottest. We lost 156 feet per second as we got cold. IMR did worse at 301, twice that. And then N140 was a little below that at 260. So as far as my change in velocity, the internet was wrong. TAC was definitely better there. Now let's talk about our standard deviation. This one was interesting. So all three of these powders had a significant increase in standard deviation as I got cold. I had one as high as 42, which turned out to be the N140. So when it got really, really cold, its SD really, really opened up. Now, I do shoot these loads between 70 and 90 degrees all the time, and they tend to average between 9 and 11. I did go back and check that. Watching that the N140 get warmer and warmer, when we hit that 70 to 90 degree range, we know we're going to be in that 9 to 11. And then when we got hotter yet, the hottest group here turned out 6. So the warmer that N140 got, the more stable its SD actually got. IMR was somewhere right in the middle. I didn't see much change in the TAC as far as its SD goes. It was high and it ended up high. So what does all this mean? Well, as usual, the internet, kind of right and kind of wrong. Depends on what you're looking for. As far as point of impact goes, yeah, TAC was worse. As far as getting it stable velocity all the way through, TAC was the best. So once again, it depends on what you're evaluating and how you're evaluating it. What does this mean to us as hunters, as marksmen? That point of impact shift, not all that dramatic. TAC did give us something to be concerned about at 500 yards, 3 inches. But the other two powders, just over an inch at 500 yards, not that big a deal, not that much of a concern. How about overpressure concerns? Well, when we look at that change in velocity from all the way down, negative 20s, almost negative 30, up to about 120, that change in velocity was significant in that range. But if we look at what they normally do in that 70 to 90 degree range, up to 100, it really was not much to speak about. Unless I'm running max loads that are already starting to show some signs of overpressure at 90 degrees or 70 degrees, I probably don't need to be concerned with that either. It's just not that big a deal. There it is. There's all the data for you. I am Old Man Taylor. Thank you for watching.